Joining us on the show, three very, very special guests. Mahesh Jethmalani, Soli Sorabjee and Prashant Bhushan himself. Thanks each one of you for being with us. Mr. Sarabjit, I'm going to go to you. Age before wisdom is what they say. What is really the big deal about sharing names? Does it really make it difficult to execute a lot of tax treaties, the arguments that have been given so far? I mean, why is so much being made about sharing names to begin with?
No, that's not the question to ask. Tax treaties, they require, as a condition of giving information to the government, that certain names should not be disclosed unless there is investigation and it's proved that accounts are illegitimate. You can't disclose names of every account holder. The account may have been opened lawfully in accordance with the provisions of the Act for an exchange and regulation. Now, the whole thing is, frankly, one would get the impression, why do people want to go to Switzerland and invest money there? Do they get better returns on fixed deposits? Not at all. So there is a certain presumption of some wrongdoing. Go to other countries, there's no secrecy laws. Then you can frankly say, hum idhar invest kiya hai, I've done it here. So this prima facie gives a taste that kuch garbar hai. When you take out monies and park them in a country which tries to shield, because of its secrecy laws, the names of the account holders. But the Supreme Court has in its wisdom said, disclose all the names. Don't be selective. Well, the Supreme Court has passed that order. The government will comply with it. But the names are to be given to the Supreme Court in a sealed envelope. And then I suppose the Supreme Court will decide the future course of action.
Mr. Bhushan, comment on that. The top court today has indicated that all the names will need to be disclosed in a sealed envelope, like Mr. Sarabjit pointed out. In a sense, do you believe that the Supreme Court has called the government's bluff?
Government has now filed an application in which they have mentioned a communication sent from Germany to India, in which they have only asked the Indian government what are the circumstances in which you have disclosed some of these names, to which the Indian government should respond by saying that, look, the Supreme Court had asked us to disclose these names pursuant to this black money case going on in the Supreme Court, and therefore we have disclosed the names. I don't think that the German government would object to the Indian government sharing these names with the Indian people. This whole issue of the right to privacy of these account holders, which is given out as a ground for refusing to disclose these names, is again a specious argument, because the right to privacy has been recognized to be a weak right and it is overridden by public interest. Here the public interest is overwhelming because there is so much illicit money which is stashed abroad that people of this country, there is a great public interest to allow people of this country to know who are the account holders. Even if some of those account holders are legitimate legal account holders, they can explain that their accounts are legal. No great harm will come to either their reputation or their right to privacy, etc. There is nothing so great about secrecy of your of the accounts which you hold abroad.
Fair point. Mr. Jethmalani, comment on that. Is the matter now clearly out of the hands of the government, and are you hopeful? Will we see the big fish, both in business and politics, now finally get nailed?
But now, I think the Supreme Court has made it clear that they are not the only agency which is authorized by the Supreme Court to investigate this whole matter, whether it is, prosecuting, arresting, or recovering of monies in those accounts, or the holders of them. This job is now in the sole responsibility of the SIT, which in turn is monitored by the Supreme Court. So it is out of the hands of government now to either be selective, to compromise on any issues. It is now the task of the SIT.
All right, don't be selective, don't be compromised, out of the hands of the government. But Mr. Bhushan, are you hopeful now that the high and the mighty will indeed be exposed finally?
Well, that is why, you see, in my view, it is important that all the names should be revealed, so that there is no selective disclosure of names which will lead to the government selecting people on various illegitimate considerations. I hope that after the disclosure of the names to the court by the government, the court will follow it up with an order to disclose these names to the Indian people.
Mr. Sarabjee, could there be some amount of witch hunting? Let me be the devil's advocate for a minute. There are concerns raised that there could be witch hunting. Do you believe that is a genuine apprehension?
Witch hunting is how, if all the names are there and there is prima facie evidence against those, you go against those. Of course, there may be political sort of war. They see so many are Congress people, only few BJP, there are others. So we are not interested in that. We are interested in monies which have been taken out of the country. These people have plundered our country. Money should be brought back. And those people also should be named and shamed.
They should be named and shamed. One can't agree more with that part, Mr. Sorabjee. But Mr. Jethmalani, let's bring you in on this, because one of the apprehensions raised by the government and why it didn't want to disclose all the names is that if the names were to get leaked, then it could jeopardize more information coming from countries like the US and Switzerland. We are signing a treaty with US in December. How genuine is that apprehension? How would you respond to that?
Frankly speaking, I don't know. This whole argument is an argument which is astounding. These names which have come out of accounts, there's hardly any investigation to be done. If you are an Indian citizen, you are not allowed to hold a foreign bank abroad unless you are doing some business abroad, unless you come within established guidelines laid down by the Reserve Bank of India. So all you have to see is he an Indian citizen or an Indian resident, and therefore is he allowed to hold a bank account? And if he does hold a bank account, does he have the requisite permission, or does he qualify to hold a bank account legally or not? If he doesn't, he's a criminal, whether he's a tax evader or the money is corruption or drug running, etc. It's a very simple exercise. I don't know why people should be aware of this law very easy. It's the most elementary bit of legal knowledge, that if you have an account and you're an Indian citizen and an Indian resident, prima facie you are guilty of an illegality. So therefore, all they have to do is find out whether the people who hold those accounts have the requisite permissions and qualify under the law to hold them abroad.
Mr. Sorabjee, how would you react to this charge? One of the apprehensions is that by revealing these names, some of these treaties could get impacted, that could jeopardize more information coming from countries like US and Switzerland. How can this potentially be addressed then?
Not US and Switzerland mainly. The thing is, if it's going to be given a sealed envelope, I don't think there's any serious question of any leak. But dear, the main thing is, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Unless you enter into this treaty which prevents disclosure in certain cases, and if you don't comply with them, then you won't get information. So look at it from that point of view also. And the country, India, has to comply with its legal obligations, treaty obligations. But the Supreme Court says, no, well, government has said it's ready to do it. Let the Supreme Court take the responsibility. It's a very ticklish situation.
But Mr. Bhushan, you're one of the petitioners. What about the genuine account holders? There are people who have legitimate accounts in foreign banks overseas. Their names will also get maligned in this entire process, and which is why concerns have been raised.
No, their names need not get maligned once the government makes it clear that, look, we are disclosing these accounts, but all of them may not be legitimate. Some of them may be legitimate, in which case the legitimate account holders can explain that their accounts are legitimate and this is how they are legitimate, etc. But in any case, you see, the government should have, these names came to the government several years ago. But it's not very difficult to ascertain whether these accounts are legal or not, because legal account holders have to disclose their accounts to the Reserve Bank of India. If they have not disclosed to the Reserve Bank, then the account should be deemed to be illegal, and this exercise of ascertaining this should not take much time. By now the government ought to have ascertained all of this. But unfortunately, it appears that the government has been very selective in its investigations, and the big fish have not really been touched, nor have their names been disclosed.
All right, so the big fish really being unaccounted for. But Mahesh, let me throw the same question to you. Mr. Bhushan does believe here that it is a very simple thing. The legitimate account holders will clarify, they'll be scot-free. What do you think? Because there is a concern that legitimate account holders, genuine account holders, will actually be a part of this entire investigation, will indeed get maligned.
Why should their name get maligned? If my name was on that list and I had a legal account, I would not feel maligned. I'd go and tell the government, I have my permission here. I'd give it to the press tomorrow. I said, this is my RBI permission. I'm completely innocent. I'm sorry. The government is only doing. The government has got a list. It's the easiest thing to separate the grain from the chaff, the crooks from the innocent. It's the easiest thing to do. Do you have the record? Do you qualify to hold that account legally as an Indian citizen and an Indian resident? That exercise does not take much time. I don't know why people have dragged their feet. And all those who have dragged their feet on discovering this elementary difference between the grain and the chaff, they are all guilty of suborning evidence, trying to help the accused persons, and they all should be prosecuted.
Everyone who's delaying a forward movement should be prosecuted. That's the view from Mahesh Jethmalani. Mr. Sarabjit, let you have the last word. Do you agree with Prashant and Mahesh, or do you believe that genuine account holders could get maligned in this entire process?
That's one ticklish part about it. But if there are genuine account holders, the accounts have been opened with full knowledge of the authorities, then they have a clear answer. Of course, it will definitely damage their names, reputation. Because one would say, as I said in the beginning, genuine to theek hai, par aap Switzerland kyun kiya? Wahan better rate se fixed deposit mein milta hai. Nothing of the kind. In fact, Swiss banks, as far as I know, even charge interest to keep the accounts going. So that's the first thing I say, why rush to Switzerland, bhai? India may be fixed deposit ka acha rate hai. Go to other countries also, there are no secrecy laws. The very fact that you want to a country which has banking secrecy laws raises a little presumption or suspicion, which may not be well-founded. Ultimately, it may turn out to be wrong, but there's the risk you have to take to balance it.
That's a fair point, isn't it? Why go to Switzerland and hide behind their secrecy laws? If all you're doing is in search of an FD, then interest rates and fixed deposits aren't too bad here in India, are they? Mr. Sarabjee, Mahesh Jethmalani and Prashant Bhushan, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us on that big debate.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.